You support SDPB through friends and with help from
Study tourism at Black Hills State University to utilize the local tourism industry as your classroom to gain firsthand experience, relevant on-the-job training, and the direct connection with local employers. Visit bhsu.edu for more information.
There's a place that's still wild, where you can roam the unknown, live the cowboy life, earn the patina, and see the world through mud-colored glasses. Cody Yellowstone, wild forever.
Business and Community Development reporting on SDPB is supported by SDN Communications. Learn more at sdncommunications.com.
This is a production of SDPB.
The Black Hills welcome millions of visitors a year, and plenty of them stay in hotels or campgrounds. Another option has skyrocketed in popularity: short-term rentals, popularized through apps like Airbnb and VRBO. But a tight housing market has some locals wondering if they're too popular. How some Black Hills communities are adapting to the shift towards short-term rentals. That's tonight's South Dakota Focus.
South Dakota Focus is made possible with help from our members. Thank you. And by Black Hills State University and Cody, Wyoming and Yellowstone National Park.
The number of short-term rentals in the Rapid City area has skyrocketed in the last 5 years. Earlier this month, the fledgling South Dakota Short-Term Rental Association hosted a tour.
A group of maybe a dozen of us or whatever went around to 6 different properties and got to see, tips and tricks and pointers, and really then sat down and just visited at the end of the day. And sort of one couple was talking about the supplier they use for linens and just sort of that community building. And I think Sioux Falls is going to do one as well. And then I'd love to see like Aberdeen and Pierre and some of those small towns just get a core group of people together to brainstorm and ideally bring along the city officials or the county inspector. When people come here from out of state, this is how
Kristen Bennett owns a few short-term rentals in the Rapid City area, including this acreage outside of town, a former dairy farm dating back to the 1800s.
This used to be a dairy, all of this valley, and it supplied all the milk for Rapid City back in the 1890s.
She got her start with short-term rentals when she moved here from Britain in far northeastern South Dakota.
I fell into short-term rentals sort of accidentally. I was telling you that I got this great house and I just couldn't part with it. But I moved out to the Black Hills and so began short-term renting it to hunting groups and whatever, and now have this place and realized there was not an association or a collaboration of short-term rental owners for the state like there is in 38 other states.
Bennett founded the South Dakota Short-Term Rental Association just 3 years ago. It's run by volunteers with property owners across the state. An organization is helpful, considering regulations for short-term rentals vary place to place. Nathan Dirksen knows this firsthand. He runs Bear Property Management and oversees both long and short-term rentals throughout the hills.
It's very, very difficult in that Pennington County has their rules. Rapid City is in the process of rules. Custer has their rules. Custer County has different rules. Hill City has rules. Lead has rules. Deadwood has rules. Lawrence County does not have rules. Meade County does not. And then those that do have rules, they're all different. And so then we're a licensed, fully state compliant company, and we're trying to comply with the laws, but it feels like the target is constantly moving.
So we're a small local business. We employ a lot of local players.
What I'd love is if they could statewide model, if counties and cities didn't all have to figure it out individually, how nice that would be. Everybody could have a standard set of like, here's at least a base template, and that's what state associations do.
It makes sense, but local priorities tend to fuel a desire for localized policies. In January, Rapid City hosted an open house to get public input on potential short-term rental regulations. That feedback will help an advisory committee come up with a recommendation for City Council. Pat Roseland is a city councilor and member of the advisory committee. He's heard mounting concerns over an increase of short-term rentals in the historic West Boulevard neighborhood, from noise, parking, and garbage concerns to a shortage of starter homes for young families. He also worries about a lack of community in neighborhoods split up by short-term rentals.
There's no neighbors to get to know, and they're there for a weekend or maybe a little bit longer, but you never know who's going to be there the next week. And I think that's really, it basically will initially start tearing a neighborhood apart if this goes on for a long time without restrictions or some sort of a licensing by the state or by the city or both.
There's one community in particular Roseland points to for a solution: Hill City. Nate Anderson is city administrator for Hill City. He says the original ordinance 3 years ago merely limited short-term rentals to a certain percentage of homes in each residential neighborhood.
That ordinance didn't last very long, and the voters put an initiative through, and that put a moratorium on all vacation rentals, all new vacation rentals in residential areas.
Those with existing short-term rentals could still operate, but not if the property is sold.
You can no longer bring a new vacation rental into a residential area. Now, we do have the downtown district, kind of where we're sitting right now, that is zoned commercial. So vacation rentals are authorized, new construction are authorized in that commercial district. So as long as it's zoned here in the downtown commercial zone, and we've seen a couple of new vacation rentals have popped up, individual houses, as well as some buildings that did mixed use retail on the ground floor and then vacation rentals on the second and third floors.
That strict limit appealed to Hill City residents, where housing options are limited. But that's due in part to geographic limitations, as is the case in many Black Hills communities.
We're surrounded by Forest Service, and so we only really have so much land that can be built here and expand Hill City. We're pretty constrained by the forest on either side of us. So you're not seeing a ton of new developments going up in town here.
Hill City is just one example of how factors like geography, housing supply, and local zoning policy factor into short-term rental policy. With so many variables at play, one size does not fit all. David Holland is another member of Rapid City's Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee. He's also president of the West Boulevard Neighborhood Association. He takes a more measured approach to the issue than some of his neighbors.
I travel a lot, and so I have stayed in Airbnbs for many, many years, probably more than 100 over the years. And so I've seen how the system works, but I also happen to be a neighborhood president, neighborhood association president, that cares deeply about neighborhood cohesion and knowing your neighbor and doing backyard barbecues and block parties and events and things like that, and the strength of having a good, solid neighborhood. So I see the benefit both ways of being able to support tourists and also having strong neighborhoods. And so I don't think that people always kind of think of it from both sides. I think they always kind of see it as kind of an invasion of their town. So if you use the platform, you kind of understand it a little bit more.
Holland also recognizes that many short-term rental owners use the platform as a side gig. That can leave room for error, especially when it comes to existing regulation at the state level.
If somebody's not knocking on their door, they don't know about it. So I would say that most people are not registered because they have no idea that the registration process exists. The state is not advertising it. Nobody is writing them a letter. Nobody is calling them. They just don't know it exists.
The State Department of Health oversees licensure of vacation homes. State statute defines a vacation home establishment as any home, cabin, or similar building that is rented, leased, or furnished in its entirety to the public on a daily or weekly basis for more than 14 days in a calendar year and is not occupied by an owner or manager during the time of rental. Statute defines other regulations for things like ventilation, water supply, and egress windows in vacation homes. A licensed vacation home is also subject to state inspection. But awareness of regulation is one thing. Enforcement is another. Plus, counties and municipalities are free to enact additional regulations. Rapid City first considered regulating short-term rentals in 2016, but City Council tabled the proposal. Then came the pandemic. Jessica Olson is current planning division manager with Rapid City.
Since COVID, we've seen a vast change in how people have been using their homes and traveling and, the tourism and everything around the Black Hills. In that time, the amount of short-term rentals has gone from, maybe the low hundreds to up to 1,000 at any point in time. That's the peak that we've seen at this point.
It's unknown whether the vast majority of short-term rentals in Rapid City are complying with basic health and safety regulations. Marlo Capsa is the Planning Projects Division Manager with the city and is helping compile data for the advisory committee.
We range anywhere from 600 to 900 to 1,000 units, listed units, and of those, I think the last time that we had checked in with the state, we were just shy of 30 units that had gone through that state licensing process. So that's the life safety piece. We want tourists to come here. We see the benefit and the piece of the puzzle that short-term rentals play in supporting tourism, but we also want to make sure that when people come here on a trip that they're safe and that the units that they're staying in have met those minimum safety requirements.
Which brings us back to the advisory committee and options for what's next.
So you have 4 ways that you can go. You can eliminate them entirely. You can ban short-term rentals. You can do heavy regulation. You can do light regulation, or you can do none. And so we already tried a ban or heavy regulation, and it didn't pass. The city council tabled it. So what I would rather do is find low to moderate regulation, something that everybody can be happy with, so that we can avoid another 8 years of no regulation, because that's just creating the Wild West.
As it happens, an early frontrunner in regulating short-term rentals is a town famous for preserving the Wild West. Deadwood first began regulating vacation home rentals 30 years ago, and demand has only grown.
Deadwood, being a National Historic Landmark, has a lot of visitors come to town. We have about 3.5 to 4 million visits a year. And with that, we're a town of around 1,300 people. So we have a large tourism industry here. And at times it's challenging when you have that many visitors into a small community to balance between the housing needs of the community and the needs of our transient vacationers, visitors that come into our community.
Kevin Kuchenbecker works in planning, zoning, and historic preservation for the city of Deadwood. He says in 2023, a task force revisited the city's approach to short-term rentals. The city matches its definition to the state's.
There are 3 different classifications of short-term rentals. We have bed and breakfasts, where the owner lives on a site, provides a home-style meal. Then we have vacation home establishments, and then there are specialty resorts. All 3 of those take a conditional use permit to operate in the city limits.
That means a planning and zoning review, action from the city commission, and annual reviews. Deadwood also introduced a 200-foot buffer between short-term rental properties to avoid too many in one neighborhood.
To date, we have nearly 40 short-term rentals throughout the community, and they are 100% compliant. We have a software program that does third-party monitoring, so we can see when somebody leases a property or advertises it on VRBO or Airbnb, and so we on a regular basis monitor the use of those properties as well.
But in a place like Deadwood, where so much of the appeal is in its historic look, some standards conflict with others. 2 words: egress windows.
One of the challenges we have with historic preservation in our community, being a National Historic Landmark, is any exterior change or alteration goes through a review process. And when a use of a property goes from primarily as a residential unit or house to a vacation home establishment, there are different rules and regulations that are set up by the Department of Health when it comes to egress. And that primarily deals with windows. And some of our historic resources, built 120 to 140 years ago or so, their windows do not meet the egress requirements now under the Department of Health because of that change of use to a vacation home establishment. So they're requiring larger openings. Well, when you put a larger opening on a historic resource, it could have an adverse effect.
In other words, those all-important life and safety regulations for a vacation home butt up against the historic resources that make Deadwood a visitor attraction in the first place. Vacation rentals exacerbate another challenge. Basic geography and proximity to federal forest land make development in the Black Hills a challenge. I met with Lead Deadwood Economic Development Corporation's Executive Director, Emma Garvin, in Leeds City Hall. Because I think that's an interesting comparison to a place like Rapid City, where you can kind of develop out in space a little bit. You can't do that in Lead Deadwood.
Absolutely, and we do have some pocketed areas of land, and certainly you can blast anything, but is that the kind of development that we really want to do in this area? It's also very expensive. And so when you're taking a look at those projects, you really have to be, guaranteed that that's right for your community.
In the same way the Old West shaped Deadwood, mining shaped Lead. The Homestake Mine sustained the community for more than a century.
All of the expense and infrastructure, anything that needed to be done in the community was done by Homestake Mining Company to keep their people happy and keep them safe and keep their kids educated, and so that they would stay working in the mine.
The Sanford Underground Research Facility meant new industry opportunities, but that hasn't necessarily translated to new housing.
And Rapid City deals with this a little bit. Because you have flat land, economic growth looks like a new Best Buy, or a bigger medical facility, or some of these other large housing complexes. We don't see our economic growth quite that in our faces, because a lot of it has been happening underground for the last 10 years, getting the lab up to snuff and now getting new scientific research projects happening down there. So while we don't have the historic preservation dollars that Deadwood might have, the communities rallied together and come up with some creative ways to deal with the infrastructure projects and issues that we have here.
Garvin says Lead had the most short-term rental listings of any South Dakota community 5 years ago. Since then, many in-town units have shifted to long-term rentals or sold to permanent residents.
And I think that's due to a couple of things. We have larger short-term rentals that are being built outside the city limits. Some of them are privately owned, some of them are investment properties that are used for short-term rentals predominantly. And so that meant that these little short-term rental owners and littler houses in the city that could have been sold for family housing or workforce housing just couldn't compete with that.
Meanwhile, luxury housing developments like Powder House Pass and Deer Mountain outside of town are underway. But those are less likely to meet the average resident's needs. Garvin says hospitality is the #1 industry in Lead. It's also one of the lowest paying jobs.
And it was just in the paper, it was the first $1 million lot in the state of South Dakota, a lot for $1 million in Deer Mountain. So, that's definitely happening. And I think my pro to what's happening out there is that all those people are coming in, and they're coming into Lead to get their groceries, and they're coming into Lead to eat dinner, and they're coming into Lead to, shop and do whatever they need to do. And so, we are winning a little bit from what's happening out there for sure, without still taking away from the workforce. I think our largest issue with workforce housing is just being able to preserve the inventory that we have. And then we don't have senior housing. So seniors aren't moving out of their homes that could become family homes because we don't have 0-degree entry apartments for them. And they don't want to leave the area. They don't want to leave their church. They don't want to leave, their grocery store or their bank.
Places like Hill City, Lead, and Deadwood use local ordinances to ensure there's some housing stock left available for residents, even as the short-term rental market continues to attract visitors. But that doesn't solve for everything.
Part of the challenge is affordability, and of course that's a challenge when the market is driven by the people coming into the community, maybe from outside where the housing was a lot more expensive, coming here and thinking, oh, this is very affordable, yet people working on Main Street may not be able to afford those. So it becomes a challenge for the community.
But in places like Rapid City, with lots of new development, it's harder to see an immediate connection between short-term rentals and housing availability. Manya Larson and her sister spent 3 years renovating this historic home near the West Boulevard neighborhood in Rapid City. They furnished it with local thrift finds and decorated it with photography from local artists. The original wood floors and stairs were covered with carpet when they first bought the house.
Of sanding. We had a couple of guys came from Mission, South Dakota who work construction, and they came and sanded laboriously the stairs, for example, like every little niche. Labor of love, because we could have just as well been like, oh, I'll just cover it up with more carpet. But it's really nice to sort of bring it back to what it was. I feel like every house you go into has like an energy and a story to tell. There was a family that was raised there. There was like moments of happiness and sadness and meals on the table. And I feel like every house really like holds that.
In the 5 or so years since she's run an Airbnb, Manya has found a passion for hosting.
When I first started doing Airbnbs, I'd get notes from people. One was really touching where they came for Father's Day a year after they had lost their father. And the mom was there, and the kids were there, and the grandkids were there, and they all got to kind of come together and spend time together healing in the space and in the house. And I love that they shared that with me. That was really beautiful. Like they said, thank you for opening up your home. This was very healing for us. We got to come and spend some time here together, remembering my father. So it's a bit more meaningful than just sort of like an in and out space for a lot of people. They save their money all year and they say we're going to take a trip to the Badlands or the Black Hills, and I want to make it really special for them.
She follows state guidelines at her properties and is in favor of reasonable local regulations. She's more skeptical about other concerns about short-term rentals. Do you buy into the concern about Airbnbs taking houses off the market for full-time residents?
I do not. I don't want to laugh about it because I haven't looked at the actual numbers and facts about it. But the way that I see houses being built steadily and all the developments that are currently growing, and the houses that are sitting vacant because they haven't sold, what's available on the current market, we don't have a shortage of houses by any means. The bigger problem probably is the cost of houses in our community versus the amount of pay that we have. And that is something that has trickled down from South Dakota being an open state when COVID happened, and then people from out of state moving here. This isn't something that we foresaw.
It's a valid point. The open for business philosophy that stabilized the tourism industry in 2020 also rippled to the housing industry as South Dakota attracted new residents on top of new visitors. And point blank, Rapid City can't keep up. Laura Jones is the Housing and Community Development Manager with Elevate Rapid City, the local economic development hub.
We build about 200 houses every year. The city issues about 250 housing permits per year. And our projected demand, based on kind of census numbers and expected growth of 1% per year, we're expecting to need 2,400 housing units of some fashion by 2030. If we were to look at the current ownership versus rental market, the ownership need would be 2,000 units. At 200 houses built per year, we are not going to hit 2,000 units built in the next 5 years. And so there is kind of a tightening of that single family market that will need to be made up in the rental market, but then where's your opportunity for home ownership for those, young families, people just moving here, people just graduating college? That opportunity is lessening and lessening every month.
Jones is straightforward on the question of whether short-term rentals exacerbate that shortage.
Absolutely, they do. It would be short-sighted to say that they have no impact on the housing market. It'd be like saying these Pinterest perfect houses that are small and cute and contribute to the economy don't have any impact on the housing market, even though there are over 1,000 listings currently today, which, if you recall back, we build only about 250 houses a year. So 4 years worth of housing production in Rapid City are listed as short-term rentals on Airbnb.
She admits homes in the West Boulevard neighborhood probably don't meet a first-time homebuyer's budget needs. But Jones points to a national study that found a 10% increase in the number of Airbnb listings resulted in 0.4% rent increases and 0.75% home price increases for the same area. Rapid City has seen a 75% increase of Airbnb listings in the last 3 years.
So I'm doing simple math, nearly 6% increase in home prices just based on the number of Airbnb listings alone, based on that national study.
But considering the broader economic implications of short-term rentals, Jones is in favor of keeping them around.
So I did some kind of creepy sleuthing where I compared photos from Airbnb to Zillow photos and then pulled their property information and found that of the 45 I was able to identify, only 4 or 5 of them were actually owned by out-of-state entities. Most of them were locally owned. And so that revenue from those short-term rentals is staying in our economy just by virtue of being owned by a local person.
And, contrary to popular belief, Jessica Olson with the city tells us short-term rentals do pay their fair share, in most cases.
So they actually do pay taxes toward, and it's the sales tax and the lodging taxes, both state and municipal, as long as they're hosting through Airbnb or VRBO, because those two have agreements with our state to be able to remit taxes to us, and then the state remits the taxes to the municipalities.
In addition to sales taxes, Airbnb operators in Rapid City alone collected $6.9 million in 2024. That's down from more than $11 million the year before. And that doesn't count any additional money visitors spend while they're in town.
The income alone from just the nightly fee is incredible, and it's really crucial to our economy at this point. I think if that amount of money suddenly disappeared, we'd be like, what happened? What closed? Did Walmart close?
The advisory committee is expected to make its recommendation to City Council yet this spring. According to the city's online survey, the most popular regulation is basic licensing and registration. This issue speaks to the delicate balance communities must strike between keeping up with changing travel trends and ensuring adequate infrastructure for full-time residents. But back on Kristen Bennett's acreage, she and Nathan Dirksen say the differences between traveler and neighbor aren't so distinct, and they hope future policy keeps that in mind.
Most of our renters come from a 200-mile circle, and in the off-season, it's a much smaller circle. That's exactly it. I mean, ask your friends how many of them we do as a family. Every Thanksgiving, we all go in together. That's our Christmas gift to each other, is we rent a cabin to spend family time together.
I don't think it's the locals or the tourists, because sometimes we're the same people. Mm-hmm. You know, this isn't an industry that just serves out-of-state people or big real estate investors. We are the people that live here. We are trying to build a nest egg and a retirement and something our kids can build off of. We're kind of the same people. It's not, I don't see an us and them. The tourism is great, but so much is local people. We have a wedding, we need extra, the hotels are booked, it's rally. My hope would be that we start to see less of an us and them when it comes to balancing the needs of the community. We are the community.